Yeah, 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 yeah. Welcome to me casa, make yourself at home, do your do. Welcome to my pad, this your lab, go create your movie. I got a crib.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us. If you want to have other ways of finding this content or more about me, you can find me on my my Twitter's hacked right now, but Instagram, it's pgarner4, and then on Twitch, it's twitch.tv//Perci Garner. You can find me there, just trying to have fun and hang out with people there. But we have a special guest today, who's actually my boss. He doesn't like to hear that, he when we go on appointments together, he's like, oh, we're just coworkers. No, you're my boss, but his name is Steve VanHorn. Pleasure to have you, Steve, and I'm excited to have you on the show, and I want to get some shows under my belt before I brought you in, you know what I'm saying?
Oh man.
But I'm glad to have you here, and we're just going to talk a little bit, about, how you became successful, and, how you feeling today?
Still working to be successful, I guess. But yeah, this is great. Thanks, Perci, for having me on. This is an impressive setup you guys have here. I've enjoyed the first few episodes, and I was thrilled to do it.
Well, he says you listen to it while you do some yard work. So, and Josh, he says, hey, we need to brush up a little bit on our professionalism, He was like confused the other day on the one episode, like, wait, what where are we at right now? Because he was just, doing yard work, and he's like, oh, snap, what's going on?
You threw the tie on today.
Yeah, I did. Well, I had a couple appointments, I had to represent ComDoc the best way I could, and Krista wanted to see me in a suit.
Perci looks sharp. I look like a scrub. He told me there would be no camera. And I've always been told I have a voice or a face for radio, so I thought that's okay.
Yeah. I didn't, plan this.
Well, now you're a YouTube star, right? So
yeah, exactly. Well, we need some video content on YouTube, but no, Steve, I wanted to have you on here just because, in my eyes, you're one of the most successful businessmen we have in the area. For one, and two, just working with you, I understand your work ethic and just what you've done to get where you're at. I mean, you started at a young age. You hear about all the sports athletes they have. It's not like Tiger Woods started golfing when he was 16, but obviously you can't go into business when you're 3 or 4 like he started playing golf. But I just thought, basically the background of this podcast is I have, people with some expertise, and I know you're going to downplay yours, but people with expertise, I want to have them on here just to share, what they did in their life story and, how they became successful, or as you would say, still working on being successful. But just want to have you share a couple things. But we're going to start, people might not know this, but you grew up in Kentucky. You can't tell by your voice, but if you spoke to any of your parents, you'd be able to tell. But just explain, I guess, how it was growing up in Kentucky.
Yeah, thanks, Perci. And whoever decided to put you and I in a room together, God help them, because this could go on for 6 hours. So just hang out.
We'll have you back.
And I appreciate all the kind words. But yeah, really, I've always considered my success just a product of the culmination of everybody around me. I've had a lot of really great people around me, and I'll be, eternally grateful to those people. And my only regret is that sometimes I don't take the time to slow down to just let those people know how much I appreciate what they've done for me and what they mean to me. So. But maybe I could do a little bit of that today, Perci. So growing up in Kentucky, I actually grew up in an area called Ashland, Kentucky. It's better known. It's part of the tri-state area. If you go over the left bridge, you're in the bottom part of Ohio. If you go over the right bridge, you're in the southwestern part of West Virginia. So yeah, everybody's got a funny accent down there. I moved here actually in 8th grade. I had to change my accent because part of playing football and stuff, when I, called out the cadence, wide, people are like, what's he saying? Is he saying wide? Is he saying, I'm like, no, I'm saying white. So I had to change some of that, or bike. I called it a bach back in the day, and ice was ice, and people thought I was saying a bad word when I wanted my cold beverage. So it was interesting, but I literally had to think about what I was saying. And for me, who speaks really fast, and people are going to understand that here in a little bit, just naturally, I had to start slowing down and thinking about my words and kind of change my accent. And my parents even gave me a hard time about it back then. Like, why are you trying to change the way you talk? And I'm like, I don't know. It just seems to fit in better. So maybe if I went and lived in Jamaica for a year, I'd come back with a Jamaican accent. I don't know.
I love that one. It's my favorite.
Yeah, mine too. It doesn't work here in Northeast Ohio, though. So, but great people down there, just really hard workers. A lot of people in the community where I grew up work for the same company my dad grew up with, which is Marathon Petroleum. Back then it was a company called Ashland Oil when he first started there. And they employ, thousands and thousands of workers. And they're a great employer. My dad just retired from there 3 years ago now, I think, after 30-some years of working his way up through that company. He was extremely loyal to the company. They took great care of him and my family. And all my aunts and uncles, I have a couple that I'm really, really close with. My Uncle Charlie was really influential growing up, just a hardworking guy, was a field service mechanic and estimator for Caterpillar, for a company called Wayne Supply down there. And just a hard worker. My aunt was uberly successful with several different companies, Agilent Technologies. It got bought by HP. She worked for HP. She actually was part of the team that developed the first 4D ultrasound. So, nowadays everybody goes in and finds out what the baby is and what it looks like early. She did that back in the 90s before it was cool. And she traveled all over the world. So she would go to Holland one week, and the next weekend she'd be in Australia. And she was just extremely successful, very professional. And then my Aunt Carolyn actually worked for Marathon Petroleum too. She was most recently, I think, in the dispatch portion where she helped with all the trucks that refill the fuel at all the gas stations, and the speedways are owned by Marathon Petroleum. That's their distribution channel. And she was successful. So, I just had these people that are really close to me. And then my Nana, who was a teacher, she was my dad's mom, who was an extreme disciplinarian. And anytime I stepped out of line growing up down there, she would whack the crap out of me with a fly swatter.
We all know you needed it.
Fly swatter, yeah. And I remember one in particular time she was coming at me with the fly swatter, and the actual netting piece flew off. So it was just a wire stick. Ooh. And she didn't slow down when she knew that was happening either. So she was a disciplinarian, but as a kid, you look back and you're like, man, that was tough. But I don't know that I, with my strong personality and being the type of person I am, that I would be where I am today without all of those people. They were all extremely influential in my life, and my dad traveled a lot growing up. For Marathon, he did turnarounds and shutdowns for them all over the country. So he would be in Minneapolis one week, and the next week he'd be down in Louisiana or wherever he needed to be. And so my family helped a lot. When I was there during the week, I might take a school bus to my grandparents' house, or I might go to my mamaw's house, who's my mom's mom. And they were the playful ones. They were the ones that anything went. Grandma and grandpa. My other grandma, Nana, she was the disciplinarian. My other grandma was like, hey, let's get out shaving cream and squirt it all over the table and draw in it. And she was like a hippie, which my mom is kind of like that too. Just kind of a free spirit and just extremely loving people. And my dad's side was never more like hey, we're going to hug you all the time and tell you we love you. That was more my mom's side of the family. And then my family was more like the strict side. But you knew they loved you because the way they treated you and how much importance they placed on you, and always asking, are you okay? What do you need? But I tell you, Perci, and I know your story. I listened to your first podcast, and I know you well enough personally that I've always had this really strong cast of female characters around me that have kept me in line. My wife has assumed that responsibility for my family now, so God bless her. We've been together now for 19 years. We were high school sweethearts, much like you and Krista.
Yep.
And maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the females in my life have just been extremely, extremely important to me. And my mom has a couple of aunts who took interest. My Aunt Susie was extremely influential.
You got an Aunt Susie too?
I got an Aunt Susie, man.
Oh,
and her and my Uncle Mark, he was a policeman, and they were over in Flatwoods area, and they were just good salt of the earth people, man, that would do anything for you. You just saw them living life the right way, material possession stuff that mean a lot to them. They just wanted to do as good for people, and they were just as pure as they get. They hosted Thanksgiving at their house and Christmas, and it was just everybody was welcome and eat everything you can, and just good people. But again, between them and my aunts and uncles on my dad's side, just always had a really good example of the right way to live life. They wouldn't have stole if you made them. They never would have cheated. They just did life the right way. And I think a lot of it had to do with my Nana raising them, obviously.
Yep.
And also my grandfather, who passed away before I got to know him, but he was a military guy. He was in the Air Force, and just growing up, I heard stories about that car was never dirty, clean at all times. If there was a fly on it, you were out there. And so it's funny because you see how that, translates down to your children. My dad and all three of his siblings, their vehicles are always immaculate, always super clean. And you're like, wow.
I noticed that yours at your house the other day.
That mine was clean?
Yeah, yep.
I like to claim that I didn't get all of those genes, but yeah, I think to some degree, my Uncle David, who's married to my Aunt Carolyn, comes to my house, and he goes in my shed and garage, and he's like, you are such your dad's son. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, this is the most neatly organized garage and shed I've ever seen. I'm like, man, I feel like compared to my dad's, it's dirty, but Yeah, they're all pretty strict. So, but that's a little bit about my history. Great people. I love the area. We relocated here in 8th grade because my brother at the time, Sam, he actually had a developmental disability. And when my dad wanted to start settling down so that he could be there for all of my sports, getting ready to go into varsity sports in 8th grade, my sister was an active athlete. She ran cross country and track and some other things in Kentucky. He said, I want to go somewhere where I can be there more during the week. And the opening they had at the time was in Canton. So we came here, and from what they heard from the realtors and other people in the area, the best school for people with developmental challenges was Starlight. So we started looking somewhere in the northern Tuscarawas County area where he could have access to that school. My brother was 5 years younger than me, Sam, and so that he could go to that great school and we could live in this community. So it's funny how everything works out. But, we came here for that. That's how we ended up in Dover. And as a result, I meet my wife in high school, and the rest just is kind of history from there. But it's funny how, I'm spiritual. I know you are too, Perci, but God puts you exactly where you need to be, and he puts people in your life that you need at that time. And he's always just kind of looked over me and taken care of me and given me exactly what I need. And it's hard to imagine my life now without my wife, but of course without my 3 little boys. Yeah. And without her, there's no boys. And it's just the way it all pieces together. I'm just exceptionally, exceptionally blessed. And unfortunately, we did lose my brother several years after we moved here. He passed away in his sleep, which was an extremely difficult point in our life. That was back in 2000. He was 10 years old. I was 15, and we had to go through that as a family, and it made us stronger, and it helped, I think better connect us to God, because as a parent now, looking back, with 3 little boys, like I lose sleep at night. I'm sure you do too, thinking what would I do if I lost one of my sons? Like, how would I even move on? And somehow you get that strength from within, but I have so much more respect now looking back at my parents, having to go through that and still raise me and my sister. Like how they somehow gathered that strength to get there. You realize there's no way that happens without God. It just doesn't. As a parent now, I would lean so heavy on him to get me through that for the strength of my wife and my other 2 children if something happened. So it really puts you, I think, closer with Christ, and you start to think about, life and how important it is and how fragile it is too. So a lot of perspective that came from my brother, but he was awesome, man. And I don't want to miss an opportunity to say something real quick about him. He was just the most exceptional kid. The kid fought his entire life because of some of his challenges. And these people are special. I've always said that some of these people with developmental disabilities, they're the normal ones. They're the ones that, have the right perspective, and we're the ones that are messed up because we're not born into a challenge usually, and some people say, yeah, but my family was poor growing up, or what. It doesn't matter. If you're born with your eyesight and you're born with the ability to hear and you have access to food or what, it's just so different than people who don't have the ability to walk or hear or think the same way. So he was exceptional because you never saw him without a smile on his face. Despite the fact that his entire life he was in pain most of the time. He was having to go through, physical therapy where they were trying to stretch and get him to walk and do different things. The kid was just the most abundantly happy-go-lucky kid you'd ever meet in your life. And I would go to basketball practice and come home, mad about something, and see my brother sitting there smiling, and I'd be like, what the heck am I mad about? Like, are you kidding me right now? Like, this kid, he's the inspiration, and him and I were really close, and him and my dad were exceptionally close. And of course, he's my mom's son, so she's always the mama's boy, but really tough time, but just an exceptional kid. And again, when I look at that culmination of where I'm at in my life, man, without my brother, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And he's actually buried here in Dover, and a lot of people don't realize, but over the years, I've had the opportunity to relocate with ComDoc, and my region's kind of all the way up to Richfield, down really far south.
That's far up there.
All the way out to Ashland at times, all the way to Alliance. So we can really live anywhere within that area. And my parents moved back to Kentucky after I graduated high school. And my brother passed away. My sister lives in North Canton, where she married an engineer for Bridgestone, who's a great, great, great guy. Takes really good care of her and her family. I stayed here large part because my brother's here. My brother's at Dover Memorial Park up north. And I feel like, that I want to be here with him. And I know that's silly. And some people probably say, that's just, you're a spiritual person, that's just his body. And I'm like, I know, but I just feel like as a big brother, that's my responsibility. So I want to be here for him as long as I can. So
I like that. And a lot of what you said is it just echoes what I said in my first podcast. We got the same aunt name and how they treat us. Obviously I was forced to live with them, but they live life right. And it makes a big impact. And then once you start thinking about it, you're like, man, all these people, and I talked about the teachers and stuff. And obviously the teachers you had in Kentucky were probably exceptional as well, but I know growing up in Dover, it was a whole different story for me, just because once I started thinking about it, like I leaned on these people more than I thought I did. But I mean, it's just good to hear your story, and I'm using this podcast to get to know my friends and coworkers more, because when we're, obviously when we're working in the office, we don't really, talk about certain things. But I did that with Jamal as well. So
Yeah, it
hope you
takes
don't
a while
mind.
sometimes for it to all come out, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, for sure. But man, talking about your brother, that like when I did the Challenger, I spoke. Well, Charlie Jones let me speak a little bit, but I was a little nervous about giving a speech there, but he took over the reins anyway. So, but when I talked there was this kid there, and it just reminded me when you're talking about your brother that he hasn't been able to talk, but he's 4, and he's able to write and read and basically get out all his emotions and communicate. He's 4. This was crazy to me that he's 4 and he was able to do all this, because I know my son's 6, and we take for granted some of these things, but those kids, man, they were there and they were just happy to play baseball. And then me thinking about my career, there's some days I came to the park like, man, I got to play baseball. And then I have to hit myself in the head like, dude, I'm playing a game and getting paid for it. Like, what am I saying?
Amen. That's perspective, right?
Yes, exactly. But I'm glad you had that in your life. But now we want to talk about, you talked up Kentucky, but now we want to hear about the real place that everyone wants to live. So no, you talked about how you moved here and the reason why, and I didn't know that was the reason. So that just shows you how great Starlight is, and it's crazy because Kentucky, the twang, you talked about the accent and stuff like that, and I've been to Kentucky, Lake Cumberland a couple times, but
That's a little further south from where I'm from.
Okay, but the move to T County. Just talk about the differences and the similarities between Kentucky and I guess Dover.
Yeah. So Ashland's much bigger. There's like suburbs. So I grew up in Summit County Summit for a little while, and then Cannonsburg for a little. We moved a lot growing up. I think I had 7 or 8 different houses before we moved here in Kentucky, and nobody was really running to or from anything. It was just my dad likes to move, and still to this day he frequently relocates. Again, my family's never really been a material possession kind of family, so my dad doesn't really get attached to homes, and my mom, they're just kind of like, oh, we're ready to relocate, so we're going to look for something new, and that's what we've always done. So it's just different down there. Highways take you everywhere you go. There's Route 60, and it's different. There's these little communities off the highway, but it's not unusual to be driving down the road and you see, a $1 million home, and next to it's a trailer. I mean, that's just kind of the community that I grew up in, and that was normal to me. So to come here where we have like a town and everything's within our town of Dover, and all these community schools are here within 10 blocks of each other, and not community schools anymore now with the grade leveling, but it was just different, to live within a town like this. And I actually lived in Willow Glen when we first moved here, so I was kind of on the outsider. I didn't realize that I'm not on the parents' parade route to pick you up to and from school. So if you live in Willow Glen, you might as well live in Canada. But it was great, and so got to know some of the people. We were lucky at our house. We had 3 or 4 firemen that lived right around us, and Paul Westlick, who was I think the fire chief or captain for many years, who was just a super guy, and his wife Carla, who she passed away of cancer several years ago. Just salt of the earth people. And when we went to Hawaii a few years ago, I got to see their son Zach, who's actually in the Navy, and he's a part of their submarine corps. I know who that is. So we got to visit with him and his wife, and so that was cool. But we just had all kinds of good neighbors. Sue across the street, I did her yard work and helped her out. But just, instantly, I think we felt welcomed by the community. It was, I think, the hardest adjustment for my sister. She was in high school. It's a lot harder to adjust as a sophomore in high school. She left her best friends that she had known since she was literally growing up. And my parents tried to help by letting them come up, once a year or twice a year. She'd have friends up to stay for a week or so. But it was, I think it was the most tough for her. She stopped playing sports, and, cliques had already been formed at that point, and she struggled to find. But she did befriend a couple people that she's still very close friends with today. And I'm really glad for her that she was able to form those friendships, because those people meant the world to her, helping her to get through that time. And for me, it was easier because that's the same age where most kids who are integrating from St. Joe come into Dover schools. So I immediately befriended some of those folks. And my best friend in high school was Matt Fondriest. A lot of people know the Fondriest family. They're like royalty in T County, and for good reason, man. They are just, again, probably the closest thing that I've found to Ashland, Kentucky, are just salt of the earth people, man. Big John and Deb, just amazing people who literally will give you the shirt off their back. And they don't care about material possessions. There's nothing fancy about them. What you see is what you get. And that reminded me a lot of my Kentucky family. My dad liked Big John, and they befriended each other. And me and Matt were pretty much inseparable all through high school. We'd go through different bouts where we'd have pretty serious relationships where we wouldn't be as close. And but it was really good that him and I got to know each other at a time where we were both coming into the school district, didn't know a lot of people, but sports helped me connect to a lot of people because I grew up playing sports. So immediately you fall into that clique because, as you know, in Dover, those are like jobs.
Yeah.
So you're spending, 40 hours a week oftentimes with, your fellow athletes. So you don't really get to choose your cliques sometimes.
Yeah,
You're
forced.
yeah. And, as an athlete, I mean, you fell in with Daniel and some of those guys because you spend so much time with them that you almost, it's like a marriage, like you almost grow together.
Yeah. I got tired of Daniel, No, I'm just...
Well, so those are the people you experience life with. So,
Yep.
when you're going out and you're fighting through the conditioning and going from sport to sport to get your body ready, those are the people who understand your struggles and what you're going through and trying to academically succeed at the same time. So, we always had that commonality. So I developed close friendships with those people. And, I think of like Corey Perkowski, who's, just a hard-working guy. And him and I almost would kill each other in practice, going against each other. And to the point that Mr. McCrate would have to separate us. You two are done. You're not going. Me and Corey were like, no, we're going again. Let's do it again. And we'd almost get in fist fights, but we made each other better, because of that. So, I think there's a lot of similarities between Dover and Ashland, Kentucky, believe it or not, as far as the way that, there's politics involved and there's a lot of people. They're small enough communities that everybody.
Yeah.
But Ashland's probably a little more disconnected. There's multiple schools there, and Dover's just a very, very tight-knit community. Like, I feel like I know everybody in Dover.
Well, that's because of your personality. I mean, you don't stay sheltered, and you talk to everybody, and that goes into why.
Do I like to talk a lot? Do I talk a lot? Do I do that?
Maybe more than me. What do you think? I don't know. But I mean, your ability to talk and form relationships, what we were talking about, I mean, goes into what my next question was and my next point, and that's how you got, I guess, in the business mindset. I want to say you kind of started early. I hear stories of you, selling a kiosk in the mall, but I know more about, you working with technology, in retail, and then you move to ComDoc. But just talk about that, elaborate on that. I don't have to ask you too many questions. You'll spit it all out.
Yeah, you don't. It's like giving a dog a bone. You don't have to tell him what to do with it. There again. The list just starts to formulate in my mind of all the people, that have helped me to get to where I'm at. And I'm just so lucky. And again, I thank God every night when I lay my head down just for putting these people in my life. And one thing I always pray for is perspective, because I think if you have that, then a lot of the other things happen. So I just always pray for that perspective. And I have a heart of gratitude, man. I've always considered myself a servant leader. So I'm here to help. And
I would agree.
I hope you've experienced that. And I hope other
sure.
people would say that. But, growing up, there was a gentleman who ran these mall kiosks, and you mentioned it, and he was the first guy that I would consider, and I hope people understand this term as a term of endearment for a good sales guy. Some people would like to use the term negatively, but a hustler. Yeah. A hustler is somebody who works hard at their craft, right? Yep. Like I would consider LeBron James a hustler. The guy, for sure. Knows how to work. And maybe, after watching this new Last Dance, people now understand just what a hustler Michael Jordan was. A lot of these young guys never knew, but he was a beast. And I was by far one of the biggest Bulls fans ever growing up. Like I was the loser that I think my 8th grade and freshman year I still wore Chicago Bulls sweatshirts and t-shirts to school. And when I came to Dover, everybody's wearing like Abercrombie, and I'm like, nah, dude, the Chicago Bulls stuff is where it's at. I'm like, come on, man, Pippen, Jordan, Rodman. So, but anyways, so Randy Meese, and he unfortunately passed away of cancer last year, which hit me pretty hard as well, because just an exceptional family. His wife Cheryl, and I knew his son, who was a younger Christian a little bit, but never knew his other children real well. But he was a hustler, man. The guy just knew how to work, and because of that, he knew that he would never be without a paycheck. So he always was adapting his business model and what he was doing. And up till the day that he passed away, he was just changing things, but he knew how to read people, and he liked to connect to people, and he liked to find a solution that they needed and try to fill it. So in that regard, you think of a hustler as somebody that maybe sold something that somebody didn't need, and that's not the case. That's not how I use the term. I think of it as somebody who tries to identify the need and then fill it, right? Yeah. And then works really, really, really hard to do that. And that's what he did. So he hired myself and my sister actually to work a number of different business for him. He had a teddy bear stuffers business, which before Build-A-Bear was as big as they are, because I remember I'm a little bit older than you. He had these malls, and one was in the flea market out in Sugar Creek, and one was up in Hartville. And we would float to these different stores, and we would sell those. And he also did everything from customized coin banks to Christmas ornaments and bed sheets. And I just learned from him to be fearless when it came to approaching people. I would stand in a mall, and he'd be like, hey, let's talk to this guy. And he would just pull a guy over and be like, hey, let me ask you a question. How often do you change your bed sheets? Have you ever felt, 400 count, thread count? And he just would talk, and he would find out what people liked and were passionate about. And at the end of the transaction, they'd spend $100, which was good for him too. So I learned from him and his wife, Cheryl, who I worked a lot with. And Cheryl would always tell you the funny story about the three of us were working together. It was like a Black Friday situation or something. And I always like to mess, me, I'm always trying to be playful. So we were all three working together at one of his kiosks, and Cheryl got to this customer first and was talking to him, and the customer walked away. And she said I walked over to her, and I was like 15 at the time. And I said, they didn't buy anything? And she's like, no, they didn't buy anything. I said, I would have sold them. That's kind of walking away. But again, I was young. I don't remember. But Randy told that story forever. And funny enough, when I provided my references for ComDoc, when I first got hired 12 years ago, Randy was one of my references. And I went in to complete all my new hire paperwork and stuff. And Patty Auber, who at the time was our hiring HR lady, she goes, by the way, this Randy Meese guy, he sold you. And I'm like, really? She goes, oh my gosh, he just kept going on and on about your character and your hustle and your drive and your intelligence. And I'm like, oh man, thanks. I'll have to send him a 50, But he's just an exceptional guy. So, but again, he passed away last year of cancer. He had fought a couple bouts with it, but just a great guy. And he helped a lot growing up and always tried to put me in positions where I could be successful. And as a result of, again, God intervenes and says, hey, I'm going to put you where you need to be. Through working at the malls, I got to know Sprint Nextel and developed a friendship with a guy named Faye Shaheen, who initially hired me as a SWAT, which is an acronym that stands for Sell What's Available Today. So I would get assigned to different Sam's Club, Best Buy, mall kiosk. And at this point, I'm 19, maybe 18. You go and they'd say, hey, we have 15 red Motorola razors today, sell them. And for every one you sell, we'll give you $50, on top of your hourly wage. So, okay, cool. So you're motivated, right? You're working off the commission system. So you'd stand there and you'd sling them all day, man. You'd pull people over. And I remember the cheesiest lines, but I thought I was like, at 19, man, I thought I was the greatest salesman on the planet. I was like, yes, I'm so smooth. I remember like guys walking by with girls and being like, hey, is that your girlfriend? Yeah. You love her? Yeah, I love her. Like, oh, well, why don't you get her a red razor? And I'm like, now looking back, I'm like, that was so bad. Like I was really bad at selling stuff. So via that relationship, I ended up working for Sprint Nextel, and they helped out with some of my education, and my parents helped out with the rest. But that allowed me to graduate from college debt free. My college experience wasn't the normal one. I was a commuter kid. I bought a house when I was 19 in Canton with my wife because I wasn't paying for my school. Between my parents and Sprint, they had it covered, and I was making really good money. I was making the equivalent of what a lot of adults were making when I was 19, 20. So my wife and I bought a house when we were 19 in Canton, a fixer-upper, and made good money on it when we sold it. But that was a neat experience. I was working at least 40 hours a week as a manager. I got the Fairlawn Sprint kiosk in the Summit Mall there and had to work at least 40 hours a week for them to continue to pay for some of my schooling and qualify for some of that. And a lot of weeks, though, we'd have to work 50, 60-hour weeks. And I was I had this little detour after high school where I did radiology school for a year. It just wasn't for me, and I knew it from the very beginning. I didn't enjoy being in the hospital environment. Just my personality wasn't, in that environment. It's not really encouraged. You know how I am, obviously, now from working with me for a while. And, everything there is much more HIPAA compliant, and that just wasn't my life. So I ended up leaving that program and went immediately into the workforce in college. So I was doing 18 to 21 credit hours a semester to try to get caught up. Okay. So a lot of people at Kent State,
12, 15,
Patty and all the Carly and these girls that I was really good friends with, Andrea, they all, they'll tell you, like, everybody at Kent State knew me as Sprint Boy because I'd have to wake up in my uniform. Like, I'd either go to school in the morning and then straight to work, or I would go straight to work in the morning and straight to school. That was my rotation for all these years, for 3.5 years while I got my degrees. That's what I did. And my wife was burning the midnight oil and working 2 or 3 jobs as well. She was doing hair, and she had a phenomenal boss up there, Joy, who helped her along the way and mentored her in her program. She's a cosmetologist, for those of you who don't know.
Okay.
And she was also helping open the Quarry golf course. So she was up there with Gary Miller and some other folks trying to get that going. We lived in Canton at the time. So we were both working. I bet, between school and work, there were times we wouldn't see each other until, 2 or 3 days would pass, and it'd be like, give each other a high five on the way out the door. But that also helped to cement that, but that cemented too in my mind that, like, this, she can keep up with the grind. Like, my wife, she knows how to work. My wife is 100% a grinder, man. She works her tail off. And that helps to motivate me too. And that's helped her to be, an exceptional mother. Obviously I'm biased, but the best mother that I've ever seen and known, next to my own. So she's phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, in the few times I've been over there, it's you know, because obviously I think Krista's the best.
Yeah.
But
You should. And by the way, you better not say anything right now that contradicts
no, I was
that.
definitely not. I was going to say I could second that Danielle, she's a pretty strong, like, because I think I talked about it, I don't know what episode it was, but the work ethic of Krista and how it kind of pushes me. And I was saying I could see how Danielle could push you, even though that would be pretty hard. Because for me, your work ethic is pretty, you know, phenomenal on its own. But when you have someone else pushing you, and because it's easy, the success you've had and the stuff, it's pretty easy to just, you know what, let me chill. But I've never really seen you go, you know what, guys, let's just chill this day. Or, you know, I mean, it's not like you're like, get out there and, you know, but it's just like, it just seems like, man, Steve, you know, is he tired? You never can tell just what's going on. You're just always, you know, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, like you're bottling things up, but I just feel like you're always like in the mood to like, let's go, let's get better, let's do this. And you're always telling us, hey, you want to share something? Did you read a book? How did you better yourself? Like share with the, you know, the group so we can help each other. Because obviously what we've heard your story, you know exactly how effective that is. So it's just refreshing that I get to work with Steve VanHorn.
You made me seem like a much bigger deal than I am. Again, culmination of a lot of great people, but you know, I owe that to a lot of people, Perci, honestly. Again, you know, just to give those people the proper praise. My dad was he was a worker, man. I watched him growing up. And I think, you know, my mom was exceptional, and she still is to this day. You know, I wouldn't be where I am without her love. But with my dad, it's just, you just watch a man be a man, and you learn kind of what to do. You know, I've watched the way that he treats people around him. I've had a lot of people tell me stories when he's not around about him and what he's done for them, and
I love that.
just the amount of respect that they have for him and how he's helped them along the way, and you know, that they'll never be able to repay the debt kind of thing. And I know my dad has zero expectations, because when you talk to him, which you have,
yeah,
he's just an extremely humble guy. My dad's like, no,
I love your dad. I love your dad, man.
Yeah, he's just
it's good though when you hear other people. I don't want to call them third parties, but when you hear other people outside your family or outside that someone that's supposed to love your dad, you know, talk about them, you know, because me, like I said, I thought my dad, you know, he whooped me. He was in the military. He was super mean. And then
my dad would beat the heck out of me, man. Don't get me wrong. I remember a couple times he punched me right in the mouth, but in hindsight, I deserved it.
Yeah.
Make no mistake, my dad's.
You can't do that nowadays, but
he would. I can guarantee you, he would. Every time he did it, I deserved it.
Yeah,
I mean, he didn't come home in a rage and just randomly do it. But you know, I crashed the car and tried to lie about it. I got socked.
Yeah.
You know, in hindsight, that made me not ever want to crash the car and lie about it again, because I knew I would get what I deserved. So there was definitely an element of fear there, but more than anything, there was always just an element of respect. You know, I don't remember ever waking up, and we had like morning plyometrics and conditioning, and you remember that game. And so I felt like we were out for like 5:55 club early. My dad was already gone. The truck was already out of the driveway. He was already at work.
Yeah, that's
and
how my dad was too.
Yeah, he wasn't the guy that ever punched out early. You know, if my dad was, you know, if he got off work at 5, he was home at 5:30, and that's when he got there every day. But I remember my dad coming home, and he, you know, go inside and get a drink, do whatever, and then the first thing he wanted to do would be go out, throw a football on the road, man. We wore out Willowbrook Drive. You know, all the cars that we probably ticked off rolling footballs and baseballs under their cars driving through, because we didn't have a flat yard. So we threw in the road, man. We would just throw and throw and throw and throw, and he'd play basketball. But he stopped wanting to play basketball as much once I started beating him. I will say he lost his passion, because I think it was always more fun when he could beat me and stuff. But, you know, he always made sure I had the resources too. Like when he knew I was passionate about basketball and we lived in Kentucky, he, you know, built a garage and he put in a full court basketball hoop. And it allowed all the neighborhood kids to come there and play. And I was always playing with guys older than me. And I remember in your podcast, you talked about that with Jamal, like playing with the older kids. Yeah. And that just helped me, because I got used to getting beat a lot by these older kids. But you also can measure yourself against, you know, your progression. Like, oh, well, last time I got beat by 10, now I'm down to 5, and now 2. And maybe every now and then I could steal a game eventually. So
yeah, because if you're just whooping on kids, you don't really see anything.
Yeah, but my dad was never like that we're going to spoil you like crazy guy, but he was always the, hey, you're going to have what you need guy. And my dad worked really, really hard to provide that. And again, my mom was the one that, you know, facilitated it. So my dad was the one that, you know, worked a lot growing up, and my mom was the one that was at home to make it all happen, which is kind of my personal narrative now, you know, with Danielle and I, because she works a very limited schedule, and she runs that household for us and does so with a iron fist, man. I could not do it without her. But again, you know, my dad just, I remember I wanted Jordans at one point, right? And my dad like subtly convinces me that the Pippins are cooler. The Pippins were also half price, but you know, two factors there. One, my dad was selling it, and I had a ton of respect for my dad. So like, oh, if dad thinks the Pippins are cool, then Pippins are cool. So let's do it. But the main factor was they were half price. So my dad wanted to save the money. So at one point, he had me convinced that the Grant Hills is going to be better than Jordan. So like, you want the Filas, man, Filas with the reflector in the heel. Those are the cool
I had
shoes.
those, man.
Yes,
I had those,
and they were cool shoes. And then like Grant Hill blew out his ankle. And,
you never know what he was going to be, but
that was my dad growing up. So he always had an element of salesmanship, apparently. But
sounds like it.
that's not his game. He always, even going back to when I was a kid, man, like I remember selling boats and cars, and my dad, like people would show up and my dad would be like, go do it. Like turn me loose. So I would go out to somebody like and start hustling, and my mom and dad would laugh. I'd go out like, so this is a 17-foot Johnson 25 horsepower, like just selling it. Like you see the metallic paint fleck, and so I was so cheesy back then. And, over the years you refine that as you work with people around you.
Yeah, for sure.
Or way better, but yeah, they're a trip, man.
That's hilarious. Now that kind of leads into you've had these figures you talk about, obviously your parents, and then you've had Mr. Meese and stuff like that, but then also you have Pete Batista. We get into the ComDoc.
Peter, yeah. Peter was he was extremely influential, and Pete and I don't talk as much anymore. And again, I know his life's busy. He has grandkids now, a grandkid, and his daughters have. It's funny. Like you realize how old you're getting. When I first started working there, his daughters were like younger than my kids are now, and now they're married and having kids. And I'm like, whoa, where did that time go?
You old as dirt. No,
yeah, exactly. But yeah, Pete recruited me hard to come work for him. And so after I left Sprint Nextel, I actually went to a job fair with Marathon Petroleum, was interested in offering me a position, big base salary. I was making like, and I'll tell you the numbers because this is a long time ago. So I had like a $60,000 a year base salary coming out of college. I was 22 years old. Dang. And I thought, you know what, that's good. Like I was making that with Sprint Nextel, and in a given year I might even make more, but it was a very commission driven. So Marathon Petroleum said, hey, we're Speedway division out of Enon, Ohio. You'll go down, you'll do a training, you'll come in, you'll have to work in the stores a little bit. And my dad helped, push things through, whatever, because that's what you do. But I ended up taking that job, and it was the first job I'd had in a long time because I had other odd jobs growing up. By the way, me and Fonzie mowed yards and made money doing that and hustled on the side. And I worked at Ponderosa Steakhouse as a server.
Ponderosa.
But like everything I'd always done, kind of my work was directly rewarded for some form of commission or additional financial incentive. And this job at Marathon wasn't that way. And my dad kind of straight up told me, like, listen, man, there's certain things that you're just going to have to understand. This is a big organization and it's a great company, but if you want to move up fast, you're going to have to relocate. That's number one thing. You're going to have to be willing to move throughout your entire career, which I experienced with him. I knew that was a fact.
Yeah.
And you're just going to have to wait your time. You're going to, as long as the people around you have been there longer and they work hard, they're going to be considered for other opportunities. And I was like, no, I want to go now. I want to go 1,000 miles an hour, man. I'm a Lamborghini. There's no rearview mirrors, right? Like, let's go. And so for 6 months, I took that position. And honestly, it was a great company. Again, I hope anybody that's listening doesn't get this wrong. Great, great, great company. And my family's, will be forever grateful for what they did for my dad and my aunt and their careers. But it just wasn't a good fit for me. Everything's about, I don't know if you've ever read the book that talks about having the right people on the bus. And then once you have the right people on the bus, you got to get them in the right seat.
Is that the book that everyone gets?
That's not the Energy Bus. No, that's a different book.
Bus. Okay,
so, I give everybody that book because that's about energy and passion, which, Percy, that's my jam. I
yes.
love the energy and passion. So, but it wasn't a good fit for me. So like 6 months in, it was a hard thing, man. I was miserable going to work every day. I hated it. First time in my life, I didn't want to go to my job. And I had more free time than ever, too, to think about it, because up to that point, all I'd done is worked and went to school. And now I had this evening hours to sit there and think about how I didn't want to go to work the next day. And I was like, is it? But then I thought maybe this is adulting. Maybe this is what it is, right? Maybe I know these people that are 60 years old and complain about their job every day. Maybe this is what I'll be doing, And, again, goes back to my dad and just kind of his kind of way of thinking. Man, you know how I think. Like, I love everybody. I don't like when my kids use the word hate, and even if they say like, oh, do you hate that guy? I'm like, no, I don't hate him. Like, I maybe don't agree with him. Maybe I don't think the way he thinks, but I don't hate anybody, right? We're all, here for a limited time. Let's try to make each other's lives as fulfilling as possible. And I remember my dad, I called him and I was nervous and I'm like, hey, I just don't know if this is the right thing for me. And what do you think? And I thought for sure he'd be like, you're crazy. You're going to leave this great career, with this company that's taking it. And he wasn't. My dad's like, listen, this is my career. I work here. This doesn't mean you have to work here for the next however many years, and just understand, my dad was always good about kind of laying out, this is what it means. If you end up quitting, you might be considered unrehireable. So you're kind of burning a bridge with a very big company. And so he put it out there for me and I'm like, I know, I understand. But then just through to make a long story short, I ended up meeting Pete through mutual people. And Pete says, hey, I want to hire you. Come in, make this presentation to a few people who I didn't realize were really big at ComDoc at the time. They were like ESOP, like Larry Frank and some other big wigs. So I really wasn't intimidated because I had a job. I didn't know if I needed it. So Pete's like, yeah, okay, cool. I want to throw an offer your way. I'm like, okay, yeah, great. Throw me the offer. And we met down here at Uncle Primo's, and he hits me with the offer. And dude, back then, my base salary, $22,000. Dude, I was 21, 22 and already making $6. So I'm like, oh. So Pete's like, call me by Friday. Well, I didn't call Pete by Friday because I was like,
$22,000.
Yeah. So Pete calls me on Monday and he's like, hey, why didn't you call? I'm like, because I'm already making 3 times that. He's like, well, let's sit down and explore, the commission structure and what this means and blah, blah, blah. And he got creative and we figured some things out and, negotiated. And at the end of the day, obviously the rest is history, but came on board, ended up getting the opportunity to come back to Tusk, Holmes County where I could work in my first professional sales job, which was nerve-wracking. And my wife and I were able to relocate back here, which was good because we were starting the conversation around, do we want to at some point have kids? And our resources are here with her mom and grandma and people like that. And she has a great family down here. So that worked out really well. And called my dad and said, like, here's what I'm thinking. And again, was kind of ready for him to be like, you're nuts, like 22 base salary. And maybe I negotiated it up to 26, but I know he wasn't giving me anywhere near 60. But he didn't. My dad's like, listen, you're gonna kill it, man. You're a salesman. I trust you. You got my support, and just let me know what you need. Which is kind of the way he's done everything in my life. Yeah, and I think it's good to paint the backstory too. That if you called, Coach Vaughn Kennel, or you called Dan Ift and said like, hey, pick Steve's dad out of a lineup, they couldn't do it. I'm confident that to save their life, they could not pick my dad up. My dad was never the dad that like went out there and said, you need to play my son more. And now in hindsight, looking back, there were definitely coaches he doesn't prefer. Like if I ask him now, he'll say like, that guy was an SOB. I didn't like him. He should have played you more. He should have played you whatever. He should have been harder on you. But he never said that at the time.
Yeah.
I get in the car and I'd be mad like, man, I didn't play enough today. And my dad would be like, then get better. Then get better. That's what you got to do, right? Because if you're that good, they'll have to play you.
Yeah, exactly.
So he never put that on the coaches. And he was just, him and my mom were never the, champions of the Tornado Club or Mother's Club. They were just very chill, laid back. They both worked full time. They had careers. Raising my brother for my mom was a full-time career, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't have time to get involved and really like blaze that path for me. You guys have heard the phrase helicopter parents, right?
Yeah.
Parents that just like hover over their kids wherever they go and make sure everything's good, right? We know there's a lot of those. And I'm guilty of being one of those at times, no doubt. But I've also heard this new phrase called lawnmower parents. Have you heard of lawnmower parents? So lawnmower parents go ahead of their child like a lawnmower would, and they blaze the trail. They make sure that the path is clear, grass is nice and knocked down, so the kids have zero resistance their whole life. And then they get out of college or they get to college and they get smacked in the face
life,
by life, and they're like, whoa, where are mom and dad at now? Except they realize come college, nobody cares who your mom and dad are. Nobody cares what your dad does or that he works here and that he's a big wig in Dover. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right? It's life now. So get to it, So I think my parents helped me a lot in that regard because I knew that they were never going to run ahead of me and knock down obstacles. It was like, hey, you're going to have to face them. They helped pay for my school, which, how amazing is that?
Yeah.
And my dad helped me a little bit to get into marathon, but it was just maybe making a phone call once they were already, ready to hire me to make sure that the wheels were greased.
Yep.
But they were never that way. So I think that helped me a lot. Looking back now, I'm like, my parents let me fail. They let me fail. They let me get hit with adversity hard and deal with that myself. And, at the time, there were probably many times where I look back like, man, I wish they'd help me out. But now I'm like, thank you. And I can't tell you how many times I've texted my dad. You can ask him, Perci, next time you see him, and said,
hopefully
thank
it's not
you for
next time I see him is around golf. Hopefully
not. No. Yeah, he'll love the golf, but you suck at it. So don't do But he taught me how to like frame walls and sweat pipe, and him and my Uncle Charlie, like they could do everything, man. And my dad used to always tell me when I was a kid that he learned it at cadet school. And I literally thought cadet school was a thing until I was like 14. And I'm like, so when do I get to go to cadet school? My dad's like, that's just a saying. You're an idiot. But it was just a phrase back then. But he could do anything, man. He could build. He does really beautiful woodwork now. And
he did our car for the
he built
International
that
Soapbox Derby,
which was like the best one there, right?
Yeah.
So he always did this cadet school. He taught me how to do so many things. So now even to this day, I'll text him like, thanks for teaching me how to install a sink. Thanks for teaching me how to cut wood and sweat pipe and fix electrical issues. Cause that's helped me a ton in life, but he taught me how to do it. It was never, well, we'll just call a plumber. And even if it meant it slowed him down, he still took the time to do that. And that's something as a parent, I think about all the time now. Like I could do it faster without Travis next to me.
Yeah.
But my son Travis, my 7-year-old, loves to learn. So
I can tell.
I'll slow down. I'll do it at his pace so he can learn. And he wants to get in there and do things. And I'm like, he's going to mess it up. But I'm okay with that. I can fix it. Everything can be fixed. So and same thing I tell you reps all the time. My team members, I say all the time, when they're afraid, I'm like, listen, you can't break anything so bad that we can't fix it.
Yeah, sure.
So go break some stuff, right? Mark Zuckerberg was big on that in Facebook early. He said, fail early, fail often. Right? That's a big thing. You see a common theme with a lot of entrepreneurs and really good team leaders is don't be afraid of failure. I mean, if you're never willing to fail, you're never going to succeed because you're going to be risk averse your entire life, right?
Yeah, I think that was a part of a lot of our business plans. I know I had it in mine. I think Kajawa had it in his, but so the one thing I did want to get into, I don't know if we have enough time, so we'll have to have you on here another time because I wanted to get into more nitty gritty stuff about how we work at ComDoc, but I'm glad we had your backstory included because I wanted to learn more about that, and I just used this podcast to do that. And but I definitely want to dive deep into just how we work, because my wife's got to go to work, so she's blowing up my phone right now.
Yeah.
But it was a pleasure having you on. Hopefully you want to come back, and hopefully you enjoy this. I did, and you can catch this episode on a Tuesday. So Tuesday morning is when we release our episodes. And you can find that on everything. Google, Spotify. Spotify's blowing up with the Joe Rogan acquisition now, $100 million deal. So yeah, and they're going to add video now. Yeah, this is on YouTube as well. Sorry, this is YouTube, 99 miles per hour with Perci Garner. But yeah, Spotify's going to be adding video soon. So that's going to be.
Then this will be on Spotify
video.
So
this will be Spotify video. But Steve, man.
We'll do a part 2, and I'll wear a suit next time so that I don't look like a scrub. Sitting here next to Perci with my jeans with the hole in the knee and my baseball tennis shoes.
This podcast is about being authentic. So that's what you're comfortable in. I just put this on to show a little bit. But
yeah, where's your workout clothes?
What? I need to go do that. But I might be working out trying to get strong to protect myself against Krista right now. But again, glad having you on. It's a pleasure working for you, and hopefully, I don't mess up and I get to keep working for you. So,
thanks, Josh. Thanks, Perci.
Thank you guys for listening. Thanks, Josh. We didn't have much input from you as we usually do, but maybe next time once we talk about.
You guys are doing a pretty good job talking. So.
Did Perci talk today? I don't even.
I like that though, But thanks again, and thank you guys for listening.
It feels like Casablanca. Shouting you my little mama. I got a crib out of water. Say we Casa Su Casa. It feels like Casablanca. Shouting you